Hello there, friends and neighbors. Today is Tuesday. It's spring, it's freezing cold out, and it's gray in Minnesota. So what better thing to do than to read about two crazy young lovers as they destroy one another in William Shakespeare's Romeo and Juliet. Now, I'm going to try and keep this episode a little bit brief, partly because it's cold, partly because I need to go cook dinner, and partly because of, just moving things along. But I do want to talk today about poetry with you. For those of you who don't know, Shakespeare, this bloke here, wrote predominantly in poetry, and most of his plays are done in what's called iambic pentameter. Now, I don't mean to get too pedantic on you, but the difference between poetry and its opposite, prose, is that prose is written to mimic a normal speech, less structured than poetry. Poetry, on the other hand, is a highly structured art form, more like song. It has what's called rhythm to it, and meter, and rhyme as well. So when we talk about rhythm, we're talking about the organization of beats in a line. If you wanted to snap out the line or beat out the line, that's rhythm. How do you organize the beats? Meter is how many beats are in each line. So if you had, say, 3 beats, that's 3 feet, which constitute the meter. And then rhyme is the similar sounding words at the end of each line for most of Western poetry. We rhyme at the end rather than interior rhyme, which is what some other forms of poetry do. Western poetry rhymes at the end of lines. So the basic unit of all poetry is the foot. A foot is how at least 2, maybe sometimes 3 beats are organized together. The foot then, with other feet, constitutes what's called the line. The line then put together with other lines constitutes what are called a quatrain, a tercet, a sestet. So you have 2 couplets, you have 3 tercets, you have 4 quatrains, so on and so forth. Those are called stanzas. So again, beat to foot, foot to line, line to stanza. Now, Shakespeare normally wrote in what's called iambic pentameter. Iambic pentameter sounds like a big, lofty word, or 2 words, really. 2 big, lofty words. But those 2 big, lofty words are really pretty simple. Iambic talks about the rhythm, pentameter talks about the meter. Iambic is that you have 2 beats, and the first one is unstressed and the second one is stressed. That's an iamb. So, it's an iamb. Different from a trochee. Trochee sounds like this. And then you have 3 beat feet like foots, feet, foots, feet. Like a dactylic. So a dactylic sounds like this. And then a anapest, which sounds like this. Hopefully you hear the difference. Iambs are unstressed, stressed feet. And when you have 5 of them together, those 5, the Greek word for 5 is penta, so it's pentameter, or pentameter as it's actually pronounced. So you have iambic pentameter. Sounds like this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's iambic pentameter. Pretty simple stuff, actually, when you get used to it. Shakespeare's rhyming scheme varies. He sometimes has free rhymes. He sometimes has very structured rhymes. Sometimes he writes in prose. I am of the opinion that when he writes in different styles, that's actually intentional. And so we can read the structure itself as part of the meaning of the work. But others disagree with me, and so that's fair enough. We can have differences of opinion. I'm going to go with what I believe. And you believe what you want to believe. It's a free country, at least for now. One of the major structures that Shakespeare worked in was called the sonnet. And I found that Sir Patrick Stewart is actually, during this time of isolation, he is reading all the sonnets, one a day. And I really urge you to go and check that out. It's beautiful to hear that man's voice bringing Shakespeare to life. So check out Patrick Stewart's Facebook page, or check out Patrick Stewart's YouTube site. I'm sure he has that up there. But he's reading all the sonnets. Yeah, woohoo, awesome. Patrick Stewart sonnets. And when he gets to number 129, I really look forward to hearing his version of number 129. But I'm going to delve into that a little myself today, and hopefully I will not offend too much. And when Patrick Stewart comes around, he'll do a much better job, I'm sure. I also strongly encourage you not only to visit Patrick Stewart's website, I also encourage you to look at the Shakespeare 2020 project. Ian Desher, who created the Star Wars series done in a Shakespearean style, has challenged people to read a Shakespeare work a week. So we read all of the Shakespeare works in a year, and it's really very exciting to go through all of these works. So I've kept up fairly well with it myself. I urge you to as well. Third thing I also encourage you to check out is a podcast by Kevin Stroud. It's called A History of the English Language, and it is wonderful. It's absolutely amazing. At least it's amazing if you're a word geek like myself and you love finding out why we say what we say when we say what we say. So, History of English Language by Kevin Stroud. Highly recommend it. Let's talk for a minute here about sonnets. The sonnet is a highly structured poetic form. It consists of 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 7, 8, 9. It consists of basically 14 lines of iambic pentameter, structured either as an English or as an Italian format. It was first made popular by a guy named Petrarch in the 1300s, and Petrarch then lent his name to the Italian style of the sonnet, and rocking along in history, we come to a second form called the English sonnet, and that's also known as the Shakespearean sonnet, because Mr. Shakespeare did the most work with the sonnet. So sonnet is 14 lines, and it normally addresses some serious material of some kind. In the Petrarchan style, just to put that out quickly for you, the Petrarchan style is 14 lines of iambic pentameter organized into 2 quatrains and then 2 tercets. So 2 sections that have 4 lines each, and then 2 sections that have 3 lines each. The quatrains are normally rhymed, end rhymes with when you distinguish what rhymes with what, you put letters of the alphabet next to what rhymes with what. So in a Petrarchan sonnet, the end rhyme is A, B, B, A, B, B, A, and then C, D, E, C, D, E. Normally there is a turn of thought called a volta that occurs after the second quatrain in a Petrarchan sonnet. With the English sonnet, which is what we'll look at here in a minute, the English sonnet has 3 quatrains and then 1 couplet at the end. So that's 3 sections of 4 lines each, and then 1 section of 2 lines. And the rhyme scheme is normally A, B, C, D, C, D, E, F, G, G. The volta, the turn of thought, occurs after the second quatrain. So normally in a Shakespearean sonnet, you've got the first stanza, the first quatrain, and it introduces a problem or a thought. Then in the second stanza, you've got that problem or thought is developed. Then you have a turn of thought, and the third quatrain, the third stanza, has a complication of that thought. And then normally you have the couplet at the end, which doesn't resolve necessarily, but kind of wraps up the conversation. And so every sonnet is like a piece of a conversation, or an idea or thought in a conversation that develops over the course of the sonnet. And you could look at Shakespeare's sonnets, reading the whole bulk of the sonnets, and say this is one long essay, one long treatise, one long conversation. So when we look at the Shakespearean sonnet, or the English sonnets. We're going to see in the section we read today, we're going to see a sonnet appear that is constructed by Romeo and Juliet together at a party. At the opening of the play, if you go back for just a second to the opening of the play, the chorus speaks to us first in the form of an English sonnet. And so now we see another English sonnet at the play, at the party, with Romeo and Juliet constructing the sonnet with each other as they talk. Shakespeare, I think, was writing this play as a embodiment of his own reflections on lust unbridled. Now, I do think that the play itself is also an embodiment of the scholastic debate between the nominalists and realists. But I also think that it is a discussion of what happens when you don't control yourself. What type of character are you when you allow lust to be the dominant force in your life? And he had this fantastic sonnet, Sonnet 129, which really outlines his reflections on this issue. Lust is different from love in Shakespeare's conception. Love in Shakespeare's conception is something which endures and is able to outlast pain and sorrow and struggle. Love is something which is far more profound, far deeper in the human person. Lust is more the sexual desire. It's more this desire to procreate. It's desire to conquer. It's desire to have a conquest. And he writes this fantastic sonnet, Sonnet 129, which I'd like to read for you here. And then I think that sonnet is embedded or enfleshed, if you will, incarnated in the play that we're reading, Romeo and Juliet. So here's Sonnet 129. If you have a copy, please read along with me. I'm going to post a copy here next to the video when we're finished. So this is Sonnet 129 by William Shakespeare. And again, Patrick Stewart, I'm sure you'll do a far better job than I do, but as it is, the saying goes, a cat can look at a king. So I'm the cat. The expense of spirit in a waste of shame is lost in action. And till action, lust is perjured, murderous, bloody, full of blame, savage, extreme, rude, cruel, not to trust. Enjoyed no sooner, but despised straight. Past reason hunted, and no sooner had, past reason hated as a swallowed bait, on purpose laid to make the taker mad. Mad in pursuit and in possession so, had, having, and in quest to have extreme, a bliss in proof, and proved a very woe. Before, a joy proposed, behind, a dream. All this the world knows, yet none knows well, to shun the heaven that leads men to this hell. I love that. Such a great sonnet. Just to unpack a little bit of it, he talks about the expense of spirit as though one is wasting one's spirit, but your spirit is lost in a desert, a waste of shame. That's what lust in action is. That's what lust is when it is acting in the world. Lust is trying to dominate the world, and when that happens, it's like your spirit is being poured out, but it's being poured out in a desert. Imagine pouring water into a desert. What happens is the water just goes, there's nothing there. And he talks about how he has a series of adjectives. You know, this type of action is when it's before it's consummated, right? Before lust actually has its conquest. It's perjured, murderous, bloody, full of blame, savage, extreme, rude, cruel, not to trust. A series of words, one after the other, just pow, 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 pow. He's really laying it on thick, you could say. But I think what he's pointing out is that this action, this experience of lust, is such that it changes a person to become less than human, that he's not trustworthy, he's extreme and rude and cruel. You can take all those adjectives and say, well, do Romeo and Juliet do those things? Or if you want to say, is Juliet a really faithful daughter to her parents? Not if we go by this description. This description of lust in action is that she is bloody, she's full of blame, she's rude and cruel and not to trust. That's pretty damning. In the second quatrain, he says that it's also something which, once enjoyed, it's then despised. So like Romeo, in a way, almost despises his situation after he's consummated his lust for Juliet. You could say also that it's, as Shakespeare says, that it's like a bait, it's like a swallowed bait, and that there's a certain level of anger or of resentment that could crop up from this experience of lust. And that it also drives a person mad. And if you notice at the end of the second quatrain, he says, it's something which is, it's a swallowed bait, which on purpose is laid to make the taker mad. And once the taker has that swallowed bait, you could read it sexual gratification, right? But once you have that swallowed bait, you go a little nuts. You go bonkers. Anybody who's dealt with teenagers who are exploding with hormones knows that this is the case. They don't think clearly. And they often do things that are just absolutely insane. Like, why'd you do that? Lust. I suppose that Shakespeare is really noticing something here about the human condition, is that we are driven sometimes by this experience, by this lust, to do things that are absolutely mad. And if you wanted to say, put it in another context, that madness is like being driven around by the gods. So it's as though lust is driving a person like a god would drive them. And one of the ancient gods in Greek mythology is Aphrodite, a very powerful goddess. One didn't mess around with Aphrodite. Well, in the third quatrain, the poet says that once madness is experienced in pursuing the object of lust, but once you get it, you're also insane. That having, and in quest to have, you act in an extreme manner. That this thing, this lust, is basically a bliss in proof, but once it's proved, it's a woe. It makes you sad and miserable. Before, it seems like it's a joy proposed, but then afterwards, it's like a dream. And then he says, well, everybody knows this. It's written down everywhere, and people have talked about it for generations, and yet, people still fall into it. And what does that look like when they fall into it? Well, it's like hell. It's like they're falling into hell. If they're driven around by this power, they are like as though in hell. And when we look at our play, we could say, does Romeo or Juliet, does Romeo strike us as somebody who's happy and gleeful and full of life and full of daring do, especially after he meets Juliet? If the answer is no, then we have to ask, well, is the opposite true? Is he somebody who is tortured? Is he somebody who is demented almost, or mad? Is he acting as though he were in hell? I'll let you be the judge on this. But as we progress, keep this sonnet in mind, Sonnet 129. It's a very important sonnet. It has a great deal of bearing on what actually the play, I think, is trying to tell us. Now, I'm turning now to our play for the sake of time, and we're going to be reading Act 1, Scene 5. This is the last scene in Act 1. And as of yet, Romeo and Juliet have not met, and they're about to meet. It's a momentous event. They're meeting at a party together, and as you'll notice, the party is one of masks and wearing masks. One of the really clever things Shakespeare does is that Romeo is wearing a mask, a physical mask, over his face, and Juliet doesn't see his face during the time that she meets him. And yet she falls in love with him. That's interesting. One could read it that she falls in love with this true person and not his handsome good looks. One could also say that he's wearing a mask. Is she wearing a mask? Certainly she would be dolled up, She would have her makeup on, her pearls, her hair, her dress. Is that war paint? Is that a mask? Do women wear masks when they go to tackle the world? When they go to conquer? When they go to get a man? Both of them seem to be wearing masks, I think, in this scene. And let's see if we can't see where the sonnet is. I'm not going to point it out until we're done. But here's the party scene. Romeo and Juliet first meet in the play. Act 1, Scene 5. Read along with me if you have a copy of the text. A hall in Capulet's house. Musicians waiting. Enter serving men with napkins. First servant. Where's pot pan that he hopes not to take away? He shift a trencher, he scrape a trencher. When good manners shall lie all in one or two men's hands, and they unwashed too, 'tis a foul thing. Away with the joint stools, remove the court cupboard, look to the plate. Good thou, save me a piece of marchpane, and as thou lovest me let the porter let in Susan Grindstone and Nell. Antony, and pot pan. Aye, boy, ready. You're looked for and called for, asked for and sought for in the great chamber. Third servant. We cannot be here and there too. Clearly, boys, be brisk a while, and the longer liver take all. And they retire behind. Enter Capulet, Lord Capulet, with Juliet and others of his house, meeting the guests and maskers. Lord Capulet. Welcome, gentlemen. Ladies that have their toes unplagued with corns will have a bout with you. Ha! My mistresses, which of you all will now deny to dance? She that makes dainty, she, I'll swear, hath corns. Am I come near ye now? Welcome, gentlemen. I have seen the day that I have worn a visor, and could tell a whispering tale in a fair lady's ear, such as would please. 'Tis gone, 'tis gone, 'tis gone. You are welcome, gentlemen. Come, musicians, play. A hall, give room, and foot it, girls. Music plays, and they dance. More light, you knaves, and turn the tables up, and quench the fire. The room has grown too hot. Ha! Sirrah, this unlooked-for sport comes well. Nay, sit. Good cousin Capulet, for you and I are past our dancing days. How long is now since last yourself and I were in a mask? Second Capulet, his brother. By a lady 30 years. What, man? 'Tis not so much. 'Tis since the nuptial of Lucentio. Gone the Pentecost as quickly as it will. Some 25 years, and then we masked. 'Tis more. His son is elder, sir. His son is 30. Will you tell me that his son was but a ward 2 years ago? Romeo says to a serving man, What lady's that doth enrich the hand of yonder knight? I know not, sir. Oh, she doth teach the torches to burn bright. Seems she hangs upon the cheek of night like a rich jewel in an Ethiop's ear. Beauty too rich for use, for earth too dear. So shows a snowy dove trooping with crows, as yonder lady o'er her fellows shows. The measure done, I'll watch her place of stand, and, touching hers, make blessed my rude hand. Did my heart love till now? Forswear at sight, for I ne'er saw true beauty till this night. Tybalt says, This, by his voice, should be a Montague. Fetch me my rapier, boy. What dares the slave come hither, covered with an antique face, to fleer and scorn at our solemnity? Now by the stock and honor of my kin, to strike him dead I hold it not a sin. Capulet. How now, kinsman? Wherefore storm you so? Uncle, this is a Montague, our foe, a villain that is hither come in spite, to scorn at our solemnity this night. Young Romeo, is it? 'Tis he, that villain, Romeo. Content thee, Gentle coz, let him alone. He bears him like a portly gentleman, and to say truth, the Verona brags of him to be a virtuous and well-governed youth. I would not for the wealth of all this town here in my house do him disparagement. Therefore be patient. Take no note of him. It is my will, the which if thou respect, show a fair presence, and put off these frowns, an ill-beseeming semblance for a feast. It fits when such a villain is a guest. I'll not endure him. He shall be endured. What goodman boy! I say he shall. Go to. Am I the master here, or you? Go to. You'll never endure him. God shall mend my soul. You'll make a mutiny among my guests. You will set cock-a-hoop. You'll be the man. Oh, uncle, 'tis a shame. Go to. You are a saucy boy. Is so indeed. This trick may chance to scathe you. I know what. You must contrary me. Marry, 'tis time. Well said, my hearts. You are prig-cocks. Go. Be quiet. Or more light for shame. I'll make you quiet. What? Cheerly, my hearts. Patience, perforce, with wilful choler meeting, makes my flesh tremble in their different greeting. I will withdraw, but this intrusion shall, now seeming sweet, convert to bitterest gall. Romeo says to Juliet, if I profane with my unworthiest hand this holy shrine the gentle fine as this, my 2 lips, 2 blushing pilgrims ready stand to smooth that rough touch with a tender kiss. Juliet responds, good pilgrim, you do wrong with your hand too much, which mannerly devotion shows in this. For saints have hands that pilgrims' hands do touch, and palm to palm is holy palmer's kiss. Have not saints lips and holy palmers too? Ay, pilgrim, lips that they must use in prayer. Oh, then, dear saint, let lips do what hands do. They pray, grant thou, lest faith turn to despair. Saints do not move, they'll grant for prayer's sake. Then move not, while my prayer's effect I take. He kisses her. Thus from my lips, by thine, my sin is purged. Then have my lips the sin that they have took. Sin from my lips, though trespass sweetly urged. Give me my sin again. You kiss by the book. The nurse enters. Madam, your mother craves a word with you. What is her mother? A merry bachelor. Her mother is the lady of the house, and a good lady, and a wise, and a virtuous. I nursed her daughter that you talked with. Oh, I tell you, he that can lay hold of her shall have the chinks. Is she a Capulet? Oh, dear Count, my life is my foe's dead. Benvolio says, away, begone, the sport is at the best. Aye, so I fear, the more is my unrest. And Capulet says, nay, gentlemen, prepare not to be gone. We have a trifling, foolish banquet towards. Is it e'en so? Why then I thank you all. I thank you, honest gentlemen. Good night. Good night. More tortures here. Come on, then, let's to bed. Ah, sirrah, by my faith, it waxes late. Out to my rest. Exeunt all but Juliet to the nurse. Come hither, nurse. What is yon gentleman? Ah, the son and heir of old Tiberio. What's he that now is going out of door? Marry, that I think be young Petruchio. What's he that follows there, that would not dance? I know not. Well, go ask his name. If he be married, my grave is like to be my wedding bed. Ah! His name is Romeo, and a Montague, the only son of your great enemy. My only love, sprung from my only hate. Too early seen, unknown, and known too late. Prodigious birth of love it is to me that I must love a loathed enemy. What's this? What's this? It's a rhyme I learned even now of one I danced withal. One calls within Juliet. None! Come, let's away. The strangers all are gone. Exeunt. That's a great section. I love that section. And that section in the movie is so wonderful to see, and the Zeffirelli version is so wonderful to see. But you notice that the Tybalt really wants to get Romeo so much. Just, get that guy. And Tybalt is really, there's some implication and some have suggested that Tybalt is himself a hothead, too much of a hothead, and that he's too much involved with the Capulet family, especially perhaps Lady Capulet, but I don't know. From the text itself, we don't necessarily get that. That's a read which I think is decent. Nothing contradicts it, and nothing seems to support it. So to read it that way, that Tybalt is really concerned with the family and the family fortune, and maybe concerned with Lady Capulet, maybe. But I like Capulet, Lord Capulet's response is, "You are a saucy boy, get away from here." And Lord Capulet is really saying, "Who's in charge, you or me? I thought I was in charge, and yet you're doing all these things without my permission. You're disrupting the party without my permission," which does indicate that at least there's friction between Tybalt and Lord Capulet. Now, whether Tybalt and Lady Capulet are a thing or an item, I don't know, perhaps. But definitely there is friction or tension between Tybalt and Lord Capulet. It's as though Tybalt is aspiring, perhaps, to the rule of the family. It's like the Game of Thrones or something like that, He's secretly wanting the power of the family. And Lord Capulet almost has to rein that guy in. And in the midst of this, you've got all the people dancing and music and everything. In the midst of this, Juliet and Romeo come together. And Romeo starts with this sonnet. They're all speaking in iambic pentameter, so it just blends right in. One doesn't notice it. But when you read in the text, you'll see that the sonnet begins, "If I profane with my unworthiest hand. This holy shrine, the gentle fine is this. My lips to blushing pilgrims ready stand, to smooth that rough touch with a tender kiss." That's the first quatrain. And he's saying, basically, if I profane your hand, then allow me to smooth that rough touch by kissing your hand or even your lips. But notice also that he makes a really interesting little image. This is called a poetic conceit. A conceit is an image that runs through the course of a poem. And a poetic conceit here is that he is like a pilgrim, especially his lips are like two blushing pilgrims. Okay? It's an interesting little conceit. On the one hand, you can say, well, he's a masher. He's trying to get her to kiss him. Right? Well, it's like, it's like a pickup line. Is it hot in here or is it you? That kind of thing. But on the other hand, I think that the pilgrim thing comes out because his very name, Romeo, means pilgrim to Rome. So it fits. My lips are like pilgrims. And really, if you wanted to go a little bit more in depth, you could say, what do lips, the mouth, what do lips do? They create words. And the whole play is about words. It's based on words. It's talking about words. It's an embodiment to some degree of what words actually mean. Do words stand for something, or do words stand for nothing? Are words a mere convenience, or are words actually tapping into a reality beyond this world? That's a scholastic debate. And in this case, those lips are pilgrims, seeking a meaning, seeking a mystery of some kind. And in the second stanza, Juliet kind of puts him off. She's a decent, wholesome girl, and she's putting him off and says, you wrong your hand too much, which mannerly devotion shows in this. In other words, You wrong your hand with this whole talk about lips and kissing and stuff, because pilgrims, saints, right, have hands that pilgrims' hands do touch. So saints with their folded hands, incorrupt, are the object of a pilgrim going to touch the relic. And so you're going to touch this relic in prayer and holiness. Palm to palm is Holy Palmer's kiss. So stop thinking about this kissing my lips thing, boy. Instead, think about it as prayer, holiness, righteousness. That's what we should be thinking about. That's modest, right? None of this kissing thing. We don't want that. And then Romeo turns it around and says, yeah, but don't saints have lips? And don't Holy Palmers have lips too? Can't have Holy Palmer kiss the lips of the saint? And Juliet says, yes, but they use their lips in prayer. So again, modesty. Just back off, boyfriend. And then Romeo says, oh, then, dear saint, let lips do what hands do, right? Because hands come together. So can we have lips come together too? That'd be so great. Yay. And he's encouraging her to allow him to kiss her, right? Because as hands pray together, lips also can pray by coming together. There can be a holy prayer in kissing, in making out, right? It's almost as though there's a movement to convert the whole sexual element to a divine thing in and of itself, a salvific thing in and of itself. Now, whether we can say yay or nay, Romeo's attitude seems to be that the sexual element is quasi-divine. This is going to be the answer to my problems. This is going to solve everything. All that loneliness, all that heartache, all that emptiness inside. Oh, it will all be solved if I can just make it with this girl. That's not true. It's not true because women are not the answer to man's loneliness. Men are not the answer to women's loneliness. We come together as partners, as friends, as lovers, but if we put our lover before God, then we end up in a hell rather than a heaven. At least according to William Shakespeare, right? Shakespeare seems to suggest that putting your beloved first rather than God first is lust in action rather than love. And a realigning of the priorities would put God first and beloved second. That's what Shakespeare seems to suggest. So when Romeo goes and suggests that the sexual experience would be quasi-divine or salvific, it's as though he's doing something rash, he's doing something extreme, he's doing something which is almost on the verge of blasphemy. And Juliet says, saints do not move, though grant for prayer's sake. If I'm the saint, I'm not going to move towards you, but I'll let you, for the sake of prayer, come to me. And then he says, then move not while my prayer's effect I take. And then he kisses her. And it's really interesting to note, she ends up being the solid point towards which he moves. She is the solid center, and he gravitates towards her. That's a kind of an interesting little trope there, and it comes up later. It's like a bird on a string, right? The bird flies away and the child pulls it back. That's a little entertainment that people during Shakespeare's era, children during Shakespeare's era will have. They tie a string to the leg of a bird and throw the bird up, and the bird would fly away, and then they yank it back down. It was great fun until the bird died, of course. But you see that in a lot of artwork, this little bird with a string on its leg. And that image comes up later in this poem, where Juliet likens Romeo to a bird on a string. She's the center, and he's the moving piece. And here we get that image. I move not, right? The saint moves not, but I may grant you this thing for prayer's sake. And then he comes and he kisses her. And that then is the end of the sonnet. The sonnet has gone with first quatrain being hand, this, stand, kiss. Second quatrain is much, this, touch, kiss. And then third quatrain is to, prayer, do, and despair. And then you have the couplet of sake and take. And the sonnet ends and they kiss together. And if we look for where the turn of thought is, the volta, or turn of thought, is right before where Romeo says, have not saints' lips and holy palmers too. That the whole conversation slightly turns a bit at that moment. Now, there's an interesting line right after that sonnet. Because he says, thus, when I kiss you, my sin is purged. My lack is purged. And she says, but then do I have that sin? Have I taken it on myself? And he says, no, not at all. If that's the case, I'll take it back. And he kisses her, or tries to kiss again. And she responds, you kiss by the book. That's a really interesting little line. Either you could read it as you kiss by the book, like you kiss by the book. And he kisses her, like by the rood, by the cloth, by the blood, by the sacred text. You could read it as though she's swearing here, right? You kiss by the book. You could also read it as you kiss in a very formulaic manner. You kiss as though you were following a formula, right? Let's do this by the book, right? Doing a formulaic manner. One way or the other, that line is it's a perplexing line. You kiss by the book. Why does she say that? It rhymes with took, it's true. But it's odd how she would respond to him when he tries to kiss her again. You kiss by the book. It's as though she's not mad for him. She's not head over heels for him. And if we're making the case that this is a romance, you'd think that she would be head over heels for him. And she's not. There's very little indication that she has a great deal of desire for him. Now, he has desire for her, it's true. He has lust for her, you could say. An intense lust. But she doesn't seem to have desire for him. She doesn't say to him, right, oh, I'd love to kiss you. Oh, you're beautiful. Oh, you're wonderful. I'm so glad I met you. She doesn't say any of that. She says, you kiss by the book. And any young man or young woman who has experienced this, where you are attracted to somebody else and they say, you're kind of weird, or you don't know what you're doing, do you? Or you're kind of a novice at this. It really puts you down, it draws you up short. And on the other hand, her saying, you kiss by the book, how would she know what the opposite was like? Does she know passion already? I mean, she's only 13. It's a very perplexing line, I think. And immediately the nurse comes in and says, Madam, your mother, you got to go see your mother. And she ends up breaking away, and Benvolio comes and takes Romeo away, so there's not a lot of development after this. But the nurse then, Juliet says, go and find out who this is. And the nurse says, oh, that's Romeo, Montague. And at the very end of the act, the very end of the scene and the very end of the act, Juliet says, my only love sprung from my only hate. And it's just a line of text. It could be read as like, oh, this is awful. The tragedy is beginning. I love this man, and yet he's also sprung from the family that I hate. Isn't it terrible our families keep us apart? You could read it that way, but you could also read it as scheming. My only love sprung from my only hate. In other words, she might be already conceiving of a little plot here. Here's a young guy who loves me or desires me or lusts for me. And maybe I can control that. Maybe I can use that. And she says, too early seen unknown and known too late. Another obscure line. What does that mean? What does it mean, too early seen unknown? What does it mean, and known too late? And then she says, prodigious birth of love it is to me that I must love a loathed enemy. Prodigious birth of love it is to me. What does that mean? And she must love a loathed enemy? I mean, you could read it as, oh, she's in love. Isn't that beautiful? And yet it's a family thing, the families are separated. You could read it that way. But then the nurse says, what do you mean? What are you saying? And she immediately puts on a mask. Oh, nothing. Nothing, just a rhyme I learned. Just something I learned. Nothing. And so you could say that Juliet is madly in love with Romeo, but she gives no indication of being madly in love. What she does give indication of is that she thinks he kisses by the book, and she's rather cool towards him. You could say that she might be scheming. And you could say that she definitely knows how to be duplicitous. And she's skilled in the art of hiding things. That's a slightly different version, I think, of Juliet. But have you ever known a 13-year-old, especially a 13-year-old girl, who was capable of keeping secrets? Have you ever known a 13-year-old, especially a 13-year-old girl, who was capable of lying? Or capable of hating someone? Is it possible that a 13-year-old girl could be very skilled in plotting things and making up little difficulties for other people? If it is in our time, it's highly possible it was in Shakespeare's time. And it is highly possible that what Shakespeare is writing here is not a character who is madly in love with Romeo and beautiful and perfect and pure and chaste and noble in her love. But rather, he's writing about a young girl who uses the love or lust of another in order to try and exact something from someone else, maybe her mother or her father. If you disagree with that thought, feel free to leave a comment. I'd love to hear from you. And if you do agree with that thought, hold on to it. Let's see how it plays out. If Juliet is noble and virtuous and honest and head over heels in love with Romeo, then we'll see evidence of her being happy and joyful and filled with an abundance that goes out to everybody around her. And that the thing won't end in tragedy. Which, spoiler alert, it does. Sorry, I can hardly contain myself. Well, that's it for today. I'm going to finish here, and I thank you all for joining me today. It's always a pleasure, and we'll continue with Act 2 tomorrow. I do encourage you to check out my Patreon page. If you feel that what I'm doing is of value, I would really appreciate any contribution you can give. My family would appreciate it too. So check out my Patreon page. I'll post it here in the side when I finish. And until we meet again, God bless you all. Stay safe. Stay healthy. Thanks very much.